What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another Riftbound League of Legends TCG video. In today's video, we're going over a Sett deck profile. Now, this build is heavily inspired and honestly iterated on the 19th place Shanghai Nationals list. I played that list with Max DePera on his channel. Really took a liking to it, and I've tweaked it to match my playstyle and my liking a little bit. So I'm going to show you the things that I've changed, the reasons why, but what I'm really going to try to do in this video is give you guys my deepest learnings that I've gotten from playing this deck, what I've learned about Sett, and hopefully make you guys better Sett players as a result. So that being said, make sure to like the video, subscribe if you're new, hype the video if you have that feature enabled, and let's go ahead and get right into it. Alright guys, another day, another deck box. This one is incredible, obviously, because it's Pikachu wearing a Mega Charizard Y hoodie, but also it's orange to match Sett, which I love, so we'll put this off to the side. We are, of course, playing the Sett Legend, one of the most value-packed legends in the entire game. Pay a power of any color, and then if your unit has a buff, you can spend that buff to recall it into your base. So it's basically Zhonya's Hourglass built into a legend. Really strong, but by playing Sett, you're always going to be playing down on runes and power, which is a really important thing to adapt to. I wouldn't actually recommend this deck for a newbie or a beginner to Riftbound unless you just really love Sett and want to play it. You'll be learning the game a little bit differently than you otherwise would be playing a more standard deck. So just be warned, but still super fun. If you love Sett, I do definitely recommend it. Let's go ahead and take a look at our battlefield lineup. You will, of course, play Monastery of Hirana. This card is going to work with all types of buff-enabling decks like the boss, Lee Sin. However, a skill you will develop when learning and mastering this deck is when you should or should not spend your buffs, because when you do spend your buffs, your units become vulnerable to removal, so that's very important to learn. We are also playing the Dreaming Tree. I am of the opinion that every deck in the game should be playing this card. I can't really think of many decks that can't get good value out of this. The only downside to playing it is that Kai'Sa is really strong, and Kai'Sa gets a whole lot of value from playing this battlefield, so you are giving them some good value there, but Kai'Sa's in a good position anyway, so that doesn't really matter. And your legend does match up well into Kai'Sa because you prevent a lot of destruction with your legend ability, which is pretty good. And then for the final one, we are playing the Windswept Hillock. This is definitely a card that I'm using from the 19th place Shanghai list. There's a lot of good pros to this. I mean, it just gives you immediate threats from one battlefield to the other. So if you take this with like your Sett Brawler, for example, your opponent definitely has to worry about your ability to just gank across, when under normal circumstances, you'd have to spend a turn coming back and then maybe spend a showstopper or maybe spend a first mate to activate your Sett and then go to the other battlefield. So this just puts on a lot of pressure. Really good. Let's talk about our rune lineup. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yellows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 orange. This has just worked tremendously well. I haven't really felt the need to change this. There's a fair amount of orange and yellow costs throughout the deck, so an even split has worked out well for me. So that's going to be our battlefields and our runes. Let's go ahead and see our main deck lineup. We are playing one Sett Brawler. Now, this is definitely a risky number, but if you learn how to play this deck really well, you can almost like make it so this guy is invulnerable. And what I mean by that is it's a little bit of hyperbole, but basically, if you can always manage this character's buffs well, you're going to make your opponent have to remove him 2 or maybe 3 times, depending on the interactions that you have, for this thing to actually get removed from the board, which is really strong. I've definitely played a lot of games where this thing has just survived the entire game ever since I play it for my chosen champ zone. So really strong there. I mean, you can protect it with your legend ability from some sort of spot removal, and then let's say you're playing against green with charm, you can potentially use a Call to Glory to save this and make it bigger than your opponent's unit. There's just so many ways you can save it. Playing one definitely is risky, but I mean, hey, it's one that you always have access to. You don't have to worry about actually drawing it in your main board, so definitely been nice. And the reason we're only playing one here is because this is a hybrid Sett build that is playing 3 copies of Sett Kingpin. Sett Kingpin is really strong in different scenarios than Sett Brawler is. He can get up to really high might numbers and take battlefields really well, just like Sett Brawler can, but the Kingpin requires other units to be buffed or for himself to be buffed to really get those massive stats. It is also nice that he himself is overstatted for 4 energy. It is also 1 power. You do get 5 might out of it, and then if you do buff him, he does gain an extra +1, because at least the way that I understand it to be ruled, he does count himself when it says I get +1 might for each buffed friendly unit at my battlefield. It doesn't say for each other buffed friendly unit at the battlefield. So really strong there, and I have been liking the hybrid build. If you guys have been around the channel for a bit, every single time I talk about Sett, I keep mentioning how I have to try the hybrid build, and I've been trying it, and I've been liking it. I've also played mono orange Sett. I did a deck profile here on the channel for that probably a month or so ago. I do like that build a lot, but this build has a lot of flexibility between different play styles, which makes it a nice mid-range deck, and I love playing mid-range, so this is great for me. Now, another card I've been 100% sold on, thank you again to the player who got 19th at Shanghai, I am completely sold on Soaring Scout. So one thing I've really learned about Sett is that you don't need to play cards like Treferian Glory Seeker that buff themselves at the low cost slot, because you're not really going to use your legend ability to save those units. It's just too costly in runes and power. Instead, you play a 2-drop like this that when it dies, you get more runes, you get more power. That's what you want to be doing. This thing you throw into a base, or throw into a battlefield rather, it scores, and then your opponent's punished for killing it or not killing it, because if they don't kill it, you get points. If they do kill it, you get runes. So yeah, 100% sold on this in Sett, thanks to testing that Shanghai build 100%. And then for our other 2-drop, we are playing 3 copies of Cythria of Cloudfield. I mean, you just need buff enablers, whether it's for Monastery of Hirana or Call to Glory. Like, this thing just getting its own buffs when you play other units is just incredible for what this deck is trying to do. It really turns the strategy on in a lot of ways. And then we are playing 3 copies of Pit Rookie. So one reason I love this build is because we are playing 9 2-drops, which means your turn 1 play is a lot more consistent than a lot of other decks, which is very, very nice. And all these 2-drops just make a whole lot of sense in the deck. I mean, Pit Rookie being able to buff your Sett Brawlers, your Sett Kingpins, your Fioras. This card is just something you have to play in Sett no matter what. You're always going to play 3 copies. Then we have 2 copies of First Mate. So originally from the Shanghai build, this was 1 First Mate and 1 Arena Bar. I ultimately wanted just to up the consistency of First Mate, because while Arena Bar is nice to have in a tempo-oriented format like Riftbound Origins is, not playing a unit on some turns can be really, really rough. And while Arena Bar can spread the love with buffs and then make your legend ability live more often, this thing being able to stand Sett Brawler up or even Sett Kingpin and just establish insane plays is really important and really strong. So yeah, wanted to see more First Mates. I like playing this at 2. I don't want to play 3 because I don't want to play this on turn 1 even going second, because it doesn't really do anything in that case. So having 2 of for the situations where it sets up really insane plays is perfect. And then we've got Fiora Victorious. So this is a card that doesn't really do much on its own in this deck, which does make it a little bit weird. However, you're more than happy to play 3 copies because it does not have a power cost. So it doesn't set you back like your Legend and your other cards that have power costs already do. And you do play plenty of buff enablers in this deck, so being able to give this a buff through at least 9 different cards in the deck is really realistic for most of the time. So yeah, incredible card. Has its own ganking, so sets up nice plays with First Mate. If you, for example, take a battlefield, First Mate, stand it up, and then gank across, that is one strong play that you can do. Then for the rest of the units, we have a couple more here. We have 3 copies of Kinku Monk. The Shanghai build is only playing 2 copies. I think that this card is another 3 of mandatory because your deck doesn't really function without buffs. So I think you have to play 3 of all the unit buff enablers. I think it's very, very important, especially if you're not going to play Arena Bar. And yeah, I mean, 4/4, solid stats. Just sucks that it has a power cost. But I mean, hey, they had to balance this card somehow. And giving 2 units buffs is really, really good value. And then for the final unit, we have 3 copies of Lee Sin Centered. This is a card that I wanted to cut down to 2 to maybe fit some of my other units or some other tech. But the thing about Sett is your draw power is not always the greatest, especially if you're not on Monastery of Hirana or Dreaming Tree, or just don't have the hands that can take advantage of those cards. So I wanted to play 3 because I want to see my Accelerate units. This is the only card that really gives itself Accelerate. So I think it's really valuable in that slot. And because we are buffing all of our units, this is extra valuable because other buff-friendly units at my battlefield have +2 might. So think of a lowly Cythria of Cloudfield. When you buff it, it gains +1, and this turns it into a 2-drop 4 might swinger, which is really, really strong. Helps you take over battlefields. So this deck is both good at holding battlefields, thanks to cards like Sett Kingpin, and even Lee Sin Centered can help with holding because it makes your buffed unit stronger, but it's also really good at taking battlefields back because of Sett Brawler and because of Lee Sin Centered. Now, going into the spell lineup, of course, you are playing 3 copies of Showstopper. This is a non-negotiable option. Honestly, you need this for a 1 cost. Enabling those buffs and moving a unit immediately into a battlefield is incredible. But this is one of the reasons why your deck has a little bit of a hand size problem, because you're probably going to play like a Fiora, for example. That's going to be 1 card out of your hand, and then you're going to play a Showstopper. That's 2 cards out of your hand in 1 turn. where you only drew one card that turn. So you do have to play with your hand very carefully. So you're playing on low hand, you're playing on low runes, you're just hoping that your massive amounts of meat and honestly your kind of power crept really strong cards can get you there, which most of the time, honestly, they can. Now, speaking of power crept cards, we have Call to Glory, one of our first cards that can be activated for literally 0 resources. This card has reaction speed. It is typically 3 energy, but you can activate it for 0 energy by spending a buff and giving a unit +3. This card is absolutely insane. If you see this in your opening hand, do not mull it away. I don't care if you see 3 copies. That might be a little bit hyperbolic, but honestly, I would consider keeping 3 copies of this in my opening hand, because the fact that you can use it for 0 energy just lets you keep playing the game when you're either tapped out or super low on runes, super low on resources. It's absolutely incredible. All right, let's go on into our next spell. Another severely insane spell. This deck gets to play a lot of insane cards across 2 really strong colors. We have 3 copies of Hidden Blade. So a couple things with Hidden Blade. The fact that you have in-base removal on anything, regardless of cost or might, is insane. You don't usually care about letting your opponent draw 2 cards, because when you're using Hidden Blade to kill something, you're setting your opponent so far back in tempo that the 2 cards they draw probably aren't going to really help them crawl back into the game if this is used in a timely manner. Another way you can use Hidden Blade is on your own units to generate draws, and you are allowed to kill your own units, and if that unit you targeted had a buff, you can protect it with your Sett legend ability, and you can still draw 2 cards. So it is a very costly way to generate a draw 2, because it's a power here for Hidden Blade, whether you hit it or whether you're actually casting it for 2 and a power, and then another power with your legend to protect the unit that had the buff, but still can be really good in clutch scenarios like that where you need to protect your unit and draw 2 cards. Next up, for another tech that I really like, is 2 copies of Facebreaker. One reason why Facebreaker is really good is because offensively, if you have like a little weenie like a Cythria and then a big unit like a Sett Brawler, and your opponent's got, let's just say, tons of meat in the battlefield, you can stun your smallest unit and stun their biggest unit, and then you're going to win that trade most likely. It's really strong there. Also, the fact that it's the 4th and 5th hidden card is really, really nice for a card that I'll sort of skip ahead to, which is Divine Judgment. We are playing the 1 of main deck tech, which is another adaptation from the Shanghai National list. This card works insanely well if you can hide cards, because this card interacts with units, gears, runes, and then your hand, your opponents as well in all those categories, but it doesn't say anything about your hidden cards. So if you can hide cards in battlefields you control before resolving this, you are going to be so far ahead in resources, it's kind of insane. So really strong thing there. A card that I really, really like. And defensively as well, let's say you have 1 unit in the base and they're swinging with 1 unit and they have no real like battle tricks. You stun both units, and because of the rules of the game, if both units are stunned and can't deal damage to each other, the attacker bounces out. So it's a way to almost guarantee a hold in those simplified Riftbound game states. Then we have 2 copies of Sabotage, one of my favorite cards in the entire game, to main deck, because it is good in generally every matchup. Every deck plays non-units, and getting the hand knowledge at a crucial point is just unbeatable. It's so good. And then for what I'm calling sort of like the power 1-ofs, these cards are at some slightly different ratios in the Shanghai build. We have 1 challenge. Having access to base removal is really nice. We can only realistically fit a 1-of in this deck unless you wanted to cut down on some other tech, like Wallop, for example. This was at 2 copies in the Shanghai build. I really didn't want to see this outside of very, very specific and niche circumstances, so I'm deciding to play 1 copy, and honestly, it's been good because it takes, again, very specific setup for this card to excel, but when it does, it's kind of broken. So having 1-of is honestly perfect. And then 1 copy Divine Judgment, great tech if you're up against an Aurora matchup. It gives you some sort of edge in game 1, but also it's great for any deck that can sort of out-resource you. So even though against Kaisa, you're able to preserve your units with your Sett ability, you're still setting your runes back pretty severely, and they're drawing a lot of cards based on their removal and they're just solid units. So Divine Judgment, setting them back in resources, is really, really helpful. So you'll find opportune times to jam this, and you will probably win the game off of it, because when the game gets simplified to low runes and low hand, Sett usually wins out in those circumstances, because your ability to protect your units is going to outvalue your opponent over the next couple of turns. Let's go over the sideboard real quick. We are playing 1 more Divine Judgment, 100% side this in against Aurora, because if you can set them back after they've been ramping before they can play Aurora, they're going to be super upset and super salty. We're also playing 3 copies of Salvage. This is probably a little bit excessive with the 1 Divine Judgment main and the 1 in the sideboard, but this is also obviously really good against Aurora. Also has random reach in matchups like Baited Hook. It is good there as well, but you can probably cut one of these if you really wanted to. 4 answers to Aurora, plus with how aggressive your deck is, I think is generally pretty fine. We are also playing 2 copies of Unyielding Spirit. Sometimes your Kaisa opponent is going to be able to remove multiple things on your board, and your Sett legend can only protect one of them. So if you are able to resolve an Unyielding Spirit, you can protect all of those units for 1 energy and 1 power cost, where your legend would not be able to do that. So that's really good. And then for 2 more pieces of base removal, we are playing the second challenge here and 1 copy of Harness Dragon. The second challenge is nice because it's so low cost. The 1 power can be annoying sometimes, but it is really good for 2 energy to be able to kill most things. When you spend the buff on Sett Brawler, it's big enough to kill just about anything your opponent could realistically have in their base. And the 1 Harness Dragon for more base removal, but also it establishes you a body. So that's really nice just to have like a sort of top end body. It's not the biggest at 6 might, but still having something that can progress into a battlefield the turn after you play it and set your opponent's tempo back is really good. I do also like it as a 1-of because it's got a very hefty power cost. And that is the profile, guys. Sideboard, main board, and everything. I really like the Sett build. If I had to say which version is better between like a hybridized version like this that plays Sett Brawler and Sett Kingpin, it's kind of hard to say. I still like mono orange. I don't think mono yellow is really the way to go because Sett Brawler is such a powerful card. I think you need to play it in some capacity. I am really liking the hybrid build right now though. Let me know in the comments below though, what has been your experience with Sett? What is your preferred way to play it? Any tips that I didn't mention in this video, please let us know so that we can share this resource with the entire community. That being said though, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.